In this video, we are going to be covering a medium mech which is a staple of many forces over the years, but particularly the Capellan Confederation and Federated Sons. A surprisingly well-loved mech in the community, today we're going to talk about General Motors' Blackjack. A medium mech weighing in at 45 tons, the Blackjack was actually a disaster for GM. It was designed for the SLDF to be an anti-insurgency mech with some fire support abilities. The BJ-1X was the prototype and was a mech supporting a larger engine than the production model, as well as flamethrowers for defeating infantry. The design was taken back to the drawing board and resulted in a significantly slower mech with a much different weapons package. This resulted in the BJ-1, a mech we will be covering shortly, and it also resulted in the cancellation of the contract for this mech with the SLDF. Mechwarriors hated the design and claimed the armor was brittle and could easily be toppled, and the SLDF concurred, leading to the Blackjack's production coming to a halt. This was a disaster from the perspective of GM, and when its Blackjack support and production facilities were destroyed during the First Succession Wars, no one seemed to really care. It would, however, have new life breathed into it after the war, and the majority of the machines ended up in the Federated Sons and Capellan Confederation, which would result in it being used by Mechwarriors to fight across their shared borders for centuries. Despite its initial reputation, it would prove popular enough to have even a new Omni-Mech variant of the vehicle come into production in the years following the Clan invasion. The BJ-1 is the primary design developed for the SLDF, and is the one with the worst reputation. I'm of the opinion, regrettably, that this reputation is not unfairly earned, though perhaps for different reasons than badly made feet or brittle armor. Powered by a GM 180 standard engine, the Blackjack can achieve a maximum speed of 64 km per hour, or 6 movement points on the tabletop game. In addition to this, it has the ability to jump up to 120 meters, offering it more maneuverability. For its weight, the Blackjack isn't the fastest, however it isn't meant to be. It can keep up with medium and heavy mech formations, especially on a strategic level, though on a tactical level this slower speed can be a hindrance. It contains 11 overall heat sinks, which offers it almost the ability to fire its entire close-range weapons package without overheating. When factoring in jump jets, however, it will run hot. In terms of those weapons capabilities, this is where it can be controversial. The primary damage-dealing offensive system the Blackjack has is truthfully its 4 Intech medium lasers. These are a short-range weapon, and despite being reasonable, there are a multitude of mechs with a very similar series of weapons, often as backups, and much more impressive primary armaments. The majority of the weight in the Blackjack is taken up by 13 tons, which are twin Whirlwind L AC-2 autocannons with 1 ton of ammunition. Just to be clear, as there are arguments in favor of these weapons, as there are with any weapon system in Battletech, I am going to be dismissive of them. The AC-2 autocannon is nearly a useless weapon system for its weight when dealing with any threat, barring VTOLs and aerospace assets. These weapons weren't overtly added for this purpose, but for general fire support. They are an immense amount of tonnage, which could easily have been invested in, say, LRMs instead, which would have yielded a dramatically better outcome. The BJ-1's biggest crime is that it wastes weight on this, and worse, puts the ammunition for this shameful weapon system in its center torso, making the unit extremely vulnerable to ammo explosions as well. In our last category for this analysis, protection, the BJ-1 is well served by a large volume of standard armor, weighing in at 8.5 tons. This allows it to stay in prolonged engagements and continue the fight when others may be knocked out earlier. This is definitely its greatest asset. The BJ-1 is a mech which, though not unusable, is deeply ineffective for what it is. It reduces its speed in favor of weapons, but then wastes that weight on systems which are frankly underperforming in their very nature. This leaves it to rely on 4 medium lasers, which, though that isn't unimpressive, it very much isn't what one would want to rely on for a 45-ton medium Battlemech. In fact, simply looking at its lighter peer, the Whitworth, shows a near identical mech, but one that is simply better by virtue of the fact that the weight is better spent. The Blackjack's weight is not. The scorn placed upon it by the wise SLDF pilots does not appear to be misplaced. Though this is not the end of the story for the Blackjack, which would see extensive refits across multiple eras. While the stock variant may very well underperform, its alternative loadouts have an increasingly stellar reputation. During the Succession Wars, an attempt would be made by the Federated Sons to improve its combat effectiveness across multiple ranges. The BJ-1DB had all of its weapons stripped out and replaced with 6 extra heatsinks and twin large lasers. Though armed across all ranges, it does lose a bit of its close range punch. This mech is also heat neutral for the most part, giving it staying power overall. The BJ-2 is an interesting design and first premiered in TRO 3050, if for no other reason than it was absolutely useless before being one of the rare direct retcons done by FASA itself. Originally published as having 11 standard heatsinks, it carried 2 ER large lasers and 4 SRM-2 streaks. The ER large lasers on board generate enough heat on their own to break the unit's cooling ability by just firing one of the lasers. Firing both together, without movement, would result in the Blackjack overheating by 13 points. This design was destined to be bad, if not worse, than the original BJ-1. However, FASA themselves would later retcon the BJ-2 to have double heat sinks, giving it the ability to sink 22 heat, making it a unit with very long range and reasonable heat sinking ability at long range, with a good ability in close as well, so long as it cycled its weapons. The BJ-2 was for a while a disaster, but now, decades later, it has become somewhat of a solid medium mech. Finally, we have the BJ-5. The BJ-5 feels like a reimagination of the BJ-1, but using modern technologies from its era. It comes equipped with endosteel, a light engine, and ferrofibers. The real advancement, however, is in the replacement of the original's weapons with far more powerful peers, namely 4 light PPCs and 2 light AC-2s, giving it the ability to reach out and do some reasonable and consistent damage at long ranges. Even if it may be imperfect in this regard, it is an interesting technological mashup. Many more innovations to the design are done through its sibling, the Omnimech version of the Blackjack, which we will be covering independently at a later date. The Blackjack series is fortunately a design highly receptive to change, which is one of its greatest strengths. A simple weapons layout has meant that it can be adjusted with the changing times of the inner sphere. Another boon for the design was its heavy armor for its weight. For weaknesses, the Blackjack suffers from some bizarre weapon choices over the years, from its original package in the BJ-1 to even the original, though later retconned configuration of the BJ-2. Starting off as a failure in the Star League, the Blackjack evolved into a more respectable war machine over time. In other words, come on, Jack. Everybody deserves a second chance. Thank you for joining me here today. If you enjoyed this content, please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel. With that, I will catch you in the comments section below.